How are you?
Fine, and you?
I'm very well. It looks like you really do have some beautiful weather.
I will not say beautiful, but at least it's not raining, so it's beautiful indeed.
Well, beautiful backdrop is what I meant. So, Caroline, would you let's just start by introducing yourself. Tell us who you are and how you got to where you are in the wine game.
I'm from the family who owns Fleur Cardinale. I'm Caroline. It's my parents, who own the chateau with my husband Ludovic. And it's if I'm here, it's thanks to my mother-in-law because she had this idea to ask me to come and to join the family and to work with them. It was in 2012. They started with Fleur Cardinale in 2001. So it's quite new. I mean, in the Bordeaux wines world. But it's a family business today. We are among the last classified growth, family owned, and most of all, we live there. So here it's the house of my parents-in-law. And
Wow.
if I turn the camera, you see the winery here, which is under work construction.
Okay.
And you have here Valandro. I don't know if you know the wine.
Jean-Luc.
Jean-Luc, yes, he's our neighbor.
Wow.
So I'm in charge of everything about marketing, communication, quality. I'm also do the harvest. I'm also a graphic designer. In family business, you have to have a lot of jobs, of different jobs.
You have to do everything. That's fascinating, but that's partly why I wanted to talk to you today because you are so good at because so many people talk about it's hard to make wine, really hard to sell wine and get your wine noticed, and you do a fantastic job. So, say that again. About your family is the winery or your husband's family?
My husband's family.
Uh, and so, what did you do before you came to the winery?
I was in a different kind of world. I was an engineer working for the French Ministry of Defense.
Wow.
Not glamorous at all. But I quit my job in 2008 and started this new life in 2008. Yes, I went back to school in 2008 and I joined Fleur Cardinale 8 years ago.
Okay. Wow. So then what I like to ask people is there's a lot of people on here who are not necessarily wine professionals, but wine lovers. Can you explain Saint-Emilion in general to us? And one of my questions, I always find that wine from Saint-Emilion can be kind of black fruit predominant or red fruit predominant. And maybe you can explain that a little bit to me. And then a broad explanation of Saint-Emilion.
It's a very tough question because Saint-Emilion appellation is probably the appellation with the greatest diversity in terms of terroirs. And by terroirs, I mean the soils, of course. You have clay, limestone, you have sands, you have gravels a little bit, and also of all the expositions. I don't know what is the best term for that. You have hills, different kind of hills. You have plateau, and so there is a great diversity in Saint-Emilion. That is why it's very difficult to really to give one label to Saint-Emilion. The
Yeah.
truth is that we have mainly Merlot,
Mm-hmm.
and then sometimes Cabernet Franc, and sometimes Cabernet Sauvignon. But Saint-Emilion, as it is on the right bank part of Bordeaux, is mainly Merlot. So it's true that in general, when you taste the wines, you have this blackberries fruit on the nose. You have this chocolate, this black cherry, this licorice also. But after that, it really depends on your terroirs. You can also have red berries and violet and truffle. And it really depends, once again, on your kind of terroir, the soils, how you work the vineyard, and the exposures. There is a lot of diversity in Saint-Emilion.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. So, can you talk about Fleur Cardinale and how you explain in general what Fleur Cardinale is? Maybe a little bit of history of the chateau also, but the style of wine and how you stand out in Saint-Emilion, because that's another hard thing to do.
Yeah, so as I said, my parents-in-law arrived here in 2001. They came from really another life. They were just, and I said just like this because it was already something huge. They were just wine lovers, and they wanted to make wine, and very quickly they arrived here in this part of Saint-Emilion. You have to know that we are located on the eastern part of the appellation, probably at the extreme part. After us, it's Côte de Castillon. What people didn't know a few decades ago is that you have exactly here in this part of Saint-Emilion the same kind of terroir, of soils, that what you can find in the center of Saint-Emilion. And by soils, I mean clay and limestone. But this part of Saint-Emilion is probably the coolest place of Saint-Emilion of the appellation. So it's true that a few decades ago, there were no classified growth in this part of Saint-Emilion. In fact, we were the first to get the classification in 2008. Yes, and it was, quite a surprise because my parents, arrived in 01 and in 06. We got the classification, even though we are located really at the extreme part of the appellation. So it means that the wine, of course, has its own kind of style. We have, of course, Merlot, but also Cabernet Franc and Cabernet Sauvignon. And you know that Cabernet Franc and Cabernet Sauvignon are not early ripening grape varieties, but on the contrary, late ripening varieties. And we are on the late ripening terroir, which means that today I don't know how to say that, but thanks to global warming, it is probably the best place to be because we are able to make all these Cabernets, and more especially the Cabernet Sauvignon, to make them ripe in October, generally late September in October, which wasn't the case before a few decades ago, once again. But today, with this global warming, we have very dry and hot summers. And this part of Saint-Emilion is starting to be a great place because you can have the maturity of the Merlot, of course, but it's not very difficult. But then to have the full maturity of the Cabernet Franc and Cabernet Sauvignon, and to keep the freshness of the fruit, what is probably the most important thing in this context of global warming.
Do you think that what do you think about the future and planning for 20, 30 years down the road? And because you're making or the wines are getting riper, does that mean some places that are in the warmer part of Saint-Emilion are having more difficulty?
It means that it will be more and more difficult for Merlot to be at the same time ripe and still fresh, and to preserve the freshness of the fruit. That's why I don't know how they do what they do in other parts of Saint-Emilion, but in Fleur Cardinale we replant more and more Cabernet Franc because this is the perfect grape variety for us. And concerning what will be the scenario in the decades to come, it's very difficult to say. My opinion is that we will have more and more extreme phenomenons. And by extreme phenomenons, I mean the frost first, then hailstorms, more and more frequent, very rainy days and with huge rain, and then dry summers. So extreme phenomenons. What happened a few decades ago is that once a year you had one of them. You had frost, but then everything after that was normal, or you had a dry summer, but that was just that. And nowadays, in this context of global warming, we have all these extreme phenomena in the same year. And you have to have that kind of terroir that can overcome every kind of situation. When you're here on clay and limestone, if it's raining a lot, at a certain point, the soils have enough water, so the remaining water is evacuated, especially because we have slopes here. And if you have, after that dry summer, you have all the water stock in the soil, so that's not a problem. The best issue or the worst issue that we can have here at Fleur Cardinale is with the frost. Because, as I've just said, we are on this coldest part of the appellation, and moreover, we are located on the northern coast of this clay and limestone plateau. So it's true that generally, when there is frost, it's not a good sign for us. That's why we were obliged to invest in new machines to prevent, to help us and to avoid disasters.
Yeah, on the one hand, you see more technology, like being able to predict the hailstorms or predict the heat wave, and maybe you could moderate it a little bit, but I don't think we're up with the global warming.
It's not finished. We will never be able to predict what will happen in the decades to come. We don't know, for example, if the grape varieties that we have just planted will be the best ones for the future, because after all, the scenario can change. And probably our daughters and sons will be mad at us saying, but what did you have in mind in 2020 to to plant, I don't know, that kind of grape variety on that place? But it's going to be, we have to do that, and that's it.
That's very funny. Kids are always mad at their parents, but it's a new twist to
Yeah.
think that you wrong variety. I think it was you, Carolyn, that I reached out very early in the quarantine, and I think you were not able to get to the vines.
Yes.
Because the quarantine was very strict. Some people were able to go out, but you chose to stay with the family and with the kids. So can
Yes.
you give us a rundown how the pandemic quarantine hit, how it worked, how that went through, and where you are now in France, and kind of, but how
Yeah,
you.
everybody was forced to stay home, except people who were obliged to work because they can't stay home. Like, for example, my husband, he came every day, even during the lockdown. And that was probably the craziest thing about this lockdown, is that the whole world was stopped, but the vine continued to grow, and it was the blossom of the vineyard. And it was completely crazy to have this contrast between our everyday life, which was completely stopped and very slow, and nature, which was still continuing. So my husband came every day. I decided to stay home because my biggest part is to work, as I said, on marketing and communication. And because and this is exactly what I said to you. I said, I don't feel I am, I have the reason to come every day to come to work here. I can come, I came, I think, twice during the lockdown because I wanted to see the vines and to see how they evolved, but that's it. And after that, during the lockdown, the first week was quite difficult because we were a little bit afraid of not finding people to work in the vineyard. And it's true that the first days, everybody was a little bit panicked. And also we were all obliged to think about how we will organize our everyday life at home.
Yeah.
So the first week was a little bit difficult, and then people came back and the work never stopped. So the work in the vineyard is normal, except with the rain, but not because of the lockdown and because of the COVID.
Yeah, it's that's part of the reason I started doing this, because I had a friend in Gaillac actually, who I was 1,000 Chenin. I have to plant them this week, so the vines don't stop, and it
Yes.
doing chat with people in your very optimistic for me, because just like you say, the Mother Nature keeps going, and you're making wine for next year, and it's like it's a sign we're gonna get through this, and so it's been good for me, and hopefully for everybody to watch to see that. So one of the things that you do that is so impressive to me is you're, I think, very unique, in that you're very good at, like, I don't know how you learned video shooting, but all the videos you make are fantastic. But your social media, can you tell us how you learned that, why you found it was important? Because some wine producers really don't. They I think they figured out they have to have a website, but some don't answer email very often. And I think that social media is almost as critical as a website, because the young kids now are tagging your wine, and if you're selling it but they can't tag you and share it with their friends, then you're missing out on opportunities. So could you tell us your thoughts on that, because I'm fascinated to hear what you think.
It's funny because in 2012, when my mother-in-law asked me to come and to join Fleur Cardinale to work, she said, it's been already 10 years for us that we've been doing this job of years, but we feel that there is something that is happening with social media. And at that time, it was just essentially Facebook and Twitter.
Yep.
And she said, I don't know anything about that, but probably you can help us. And I had absolutely no skills for that. But I thought, okay, it's going to be like my diary. I don't know if I can say that, but like the diary of our work. It was for me also my first steps at Fleur Cardinale, and I mean in the world of winemaking. So it started like that, like a diary that I explored with pictures and my first videos. And then I saw that it would be very interesting to interact with people, probably also because You know, we don't sell it in direct. We'll sell through wine merchants in Bordeaux. And it was the perfect opportunity for me to talk with people who are really drinking our wines. Oh, let me just say there is my father-in-law here working
Oh,
in the
awesome.
vineyard.
Oh, how lucky for us.
Say hi. Dominique is working and having a look of the vineyard. So yeah, it started really like that, and I saw really the interest of people to see more and to learning more, and also to see much more than just technical tasting or technical explanations, and that people wanting to know more about your world, about the family atmosphere, about what you have in mind exactly, because you have good scores, you have a good yeah, the wine is selling well, but after all, what is important is who you are as a winemaker for people who drink your wine. And I started also to make this a little bit crazy videos to show that we are winemakers, but we are normal people also. So we can be serious, but we can be funny at the same time, and it worked pretty well. So now it's becoming more and more important in my job, and I think it's very important also for Fleur Cardinale. And we have this image of very serious wine, but also very normal people, and people who try to explore new ways to explain their work and to explain their philosophy of work, of life in general.
Hmm. So I just lost my train of thought. It is fascinating because I had lunch with Serge Hochar from Chateau once, and he said having a glass of my wine is like having a conversation with me, and it really struck me that it's a way of communicating with the winemaker, and this really gives people the connection of that. And then there's the other thing, many people say they had a glass of and they'll forever drink that wine because they liked it, but it's another way. It's like you're taking a little visit to Saint-Emilion to have some of your wine, and so I think this strengthens that. But is there some resentment? I think some people are like, oh, I make my wine, why do I have to get out there and sell it? But I think nowadays it's the kind of the reality of it.
It is, and it is my first reaction as a consumer, as I watch the social media and I try to know more about the whole environment of the product in general. I mean, so it's not just the quality of the products; it's also what they have in mind, and yeah, what is the atmosphere? Is it a luxury atmosphere, a friendly one, eco-responsible atmosphere? And that's something very important to me as a consumer. So I guess it's the case for a lot of people of my generation, especially.
I want to go back to some broad strokes of the conversation, and can you tell us how, like Saint-Emilion, the wines that you make, how do they like what kind of food do you put it with, and how might Saint-Emilion be different from like a Pauillac as far as in the glass and how you would pair it and what you cook with it, say in Saint-Emilion?
It's interesting because I have that kind of question quite often. I have to admit it. My answer is always the same: is that if you have a perfect balanced wine, then you can pair it pretty well with a lot of different kind of food. I mean, we drink our wine every day, not every day, but I mean several times a week. So I don't eat just meat and cheese, because otherwise I will be probably overweight. But you can have our wine. For example, I made a recipe with a French blogger specialized in gastronomy, and she paired the wine with vegetables, even as a starter, with I think it would be difficult for me to find the English terms for that, but even with vegetables, as soon as you have a great quality oil, it can pair pretty well.
As
Of
long
course,
quantity of what? I missed that.
olive oil.
Oh, olive oil. Okay, yeah, fat.
Because you have the greasy side of the oil that can pair as well with the vegetables. As soon, of course, as you don't have asparagus, because asparagus, you have to pair them with white wine.
Yeah.
But talking about the meat, it can be a lot of things. It can be, of course, beef, but also chicken with... The sauce is very important. If you have a sauce with a great texture with aromas like mushrooms or even nuts, or it compares pretty well. Even with fish, we try. My mother-in-law is a cooker, and she paired it also with fish. And I tried recently a recipe with dessert, because usually you can't imagine that you can pair Saint-Emilion wine with dessert, but it's the case. You put just strawberries, raspberries, with pistachios, with an ice cream of pistachios, and with a little bit of honey, and it's just amazing. And the wine pairs very well with that kind of dessert. So
Wow.
as long as the wine is well balanced, you have the sweetness of the wine without the sugar, of course, but this kind of sweet taste, and you have the acidity, and you have very velvety tannins. That's probably why we can pair a lot of different things with the wine of Saint-Emilion. It's because the tannins are very, very silky, and the mellow fruit gives this very fruity side, full-bodied wines, but with this velvety mouthfeel. So you can pair it with a lot of different kind of food. Yes.
That's nice to hear you say, because I started trying to be more vegetarian. I did a couple of dinners, pairing the whole dinner with red wine from Bordeaux, and I really think Right Bank pairs with many, many things, like you said, mushrooms and nuts. And as long as you have fat and some soft tannins, like you said, I think it's fairly easy.
You can pair, yeah.
Wines.
I haven't understood.
The life cycle of the vine. Where are we today? What's happening in the work in the vineyard and the maturity of the vines?
Are you're talking about what is happening at the moment in the vineyard?
Yeah.
Okay, so at the moment, do you want me to show you the vines? It will be probably more. Okay, let's do that. I just have not to fall, or it could be. It could be very funny, you know.
We'll have it on tape.
Let me show you the vine. So this is how is it today.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we are learning for more and more sun,
Mm-hmm.
because this is the moment we need the sun, just to be sure also we don't have too many diseases at the moment. We have a lot of work in the vineyard just to be sure to cut all the leaves, also to start to leaf the vineyard, and to prepare the vineyard to be ready for the sun of the summer. What can I say more? We have a lot of work at the moment, because the work is huge everywhere in the vineyard. The vines grows very fast, and you have the rain, so you have to avoid all the diseases. So you have to air each vine to be sure that the humidity doesn't stay inside the plot.
To assure that, are you raising the second wire, or are you trimming, or what's the actual work?
Cutting, yes. Is it trimming? When you cut the top of the leaves, when you look at that plot, you see it's not trimming for the moment. Yes.
And my friend AJ is still on here. Can you show us the soil? He's grabbed whatever.
Here it's a mix of clay and limestone. You see the clay here. You see the limestone here, and the clay. So it's a mix. We are on the plot of Cabernet Franc here. A nice one. And it for the moment dry, so it's good. The tractor can drive inside, which is probably the most important thing at the moment.
How many hectares is Fleur Cardinale?
So Fleur Cardinale is 23 hectares and a half, and we have another chateau. I don't know if you can see it. Another chateau. The name is Chateau Cardinale. Croix means cross, and it's 11 hectares, and it's a neighboring Fleur Cardinale. I will show you the winery. You can see the two wineries. They are distant from 800 meters. So this is here, There is a winery here. It's Chateau Cardinale. Okay. Then you have the plot of Fleur Cardinale here, some plot of Valandro here. And we have also a plot here of white grape varieties that we've just planted.
That's exciting.
And so it's the winery of Fleur Cardinale with the vineyard around. And yes, Valandro.
Fantastic. Wow. Again, I lost my train of thought. I should write down my questions more. Oh yeah, en primeur. What are you doing for en primeur?
Oh, we released the wine probably 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
I haven't heard.
Did you send little samples to people?
Yes, a lot of samples, yes, to not only to journalists, but also to importers, different kind of customers that weren't able to come and to taste the wines. I don't know, we've sent something like 300 different bottles of samples all over the world.
Are you sending full 750 milliliter bottles?
It depended. It really depended on the demand of the customers.
And samples that are traveling, say, up to the UK or America, they're doing okay?
That was our main issue, to be sure that once arrived, the samples were in a perfect state. I used to travel a lot with my primeurs samples, so it wasn't a problem for me, but the only thing is that usually I'm behind the bottle on the other side to taste the bottle. So it wasn't the case this year, but we had to do it. We had to do it. We had to take the risk. Mm-hmm. It was a bit risky, but when I see the different scores that we have, apparently the wines tasted well, even on the other side of the world, even though we weren't behind the bottle.
Yeah. Well, here. Are you, there's a little bit of a discussion about whether wineries make more half bottles such that salespeople can leave samples, because many people aren't going to want to see face to face, and then many more restaurants are doing carry out, and a half bottle might be more appropriate for carry out. Are you considering that at all?
We haven't that kind of demand, but we can adapt, so that's not a problem. If tomorrow the market changes and
Sorry, I lost you.
Do you see me?
I missed the answer to said if the market ends, you can get half bottles back very quickly, or you can do that quickly.
No. We can do, of course. We don't have the demand for the moment. We have, for example, more demand for cases of 6 bottles instead of 12 bottles. Okay. So this is already something that we do. And if tomorrow the market changes and ask for half bottles, then we will adapt. No problem. It's not a problem. After all, it's still the same wine.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're try to keep it relatively brief. It has been a pleasure to finally chat with you. Is writer for a half an hour. It's a real with you. So thank you very, very much.
I'm very happy to. Thank you again for the offer.
It's my pleasure. And we'll see you soon, I hope, next time around.
No problem. And when you come next time, you will be there with our new winery.
I can't wait.
And we'll have a drink there.
Awesome. I look forward to it. Thank you, Caroline. It's really been a pleasure.
For me too. Bye. Have a good day.